ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि ओम। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। ओम सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणी विद्यारंभं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। So far we have covered most of these questions. Just as a recap, we spoke about the vision on which the way of life is based, that everything here is nothing but Bhagavan. That is the base vision. And the entire life style, the way of life, is based on this one vision. That is the anchor vision, and then you have the whole thing around it, whether it is the literature or the music, or it is how you eat, how you sleep, how you walk, what language you use, how do you use the language, how do you pronounce things, what you wear, how you conduct various ceremonies in your life, stages of life, how do you look at things, how do you look at your children, how do you look at the book, how do you look at the money, how do you look at the knowledge, how do you look at your parents, how do you look at your teacher, how do you look at the objects around you, how do you look at the weapons, how do you look at the trees, how do you look at the mountains, the rivers, the sun, the moon, your body, the diseases, the pain, the joy, everything is based on this vision. Correct? That is why it is a way of life. So we saw that. Are the Vedas scientific? Jaishankar ji spoke about it. Scientific is a term used to describe what is within the domain of perception and inference. Perceived things you try to understand, and you infer certain things, you create some theorems, you try to stitch together what you are seeing, you understand the mechanics of how it works, and you advance inventions based on it. These are great things, but the domain is within what is seen, what is perceived, and what is inferred. But are Vedas scientific? Vedas are not opposed to science. Lot of what Vedas talk about is correlated by science, but the domain of Vedas is not within the perception or inference. What cannot be perceived by humans and what cannot be inferred is what is the domain of Vedas, because Veda is itself a means of knowing beyond what is within the means of perception and inference. Therefore, it is what Veda reveals is not contradicted by science. Wherever there is a kind of overlap, as in, suppose I say, rain, for a mantra for the rains, right? So science cannot come and say that this mantra won't work, because it's not within its domain. Now you start Veda, using Veda by certain Shraddha, like my Shraddha on my other means of knowing. Only when I have trust that my eyes will see some minimal trust, then only I'll open my eyes to see things. That is Shraddha. You give it a benefit of doubt because you don't have a choice. You can't use your ears to see because there is no choice. So within what is in the domain of Veda also there is no choice. Only when everything else is depleted, anyway you go to Vedas. You've tried so many things, but you don't see why there is an obstruction, why you are not able to get rain in this area. You don't know. You don't know why somebody is not having children, right? You don't know why there are so many things happening to you which you are not getting the right results. Why? You don't know. Science can't explain, right? You are doing the things in the right way as much as you understand. You deployed all your resources, but you are not getting the results. So something is obstructing you, right? Then you go and Veda gives you a solution, for example. That's when you go, because you don't have a choice. That's what I'm saying. So within the domain of what Vedas say, you don't have a choice. So you give it a benefit of doubt and you use it as a means of knowledge. If it works for you. Like your eyes. That's the third one, right? Then, is there a God or a creator of this world? We spoke about it. An intelligently put together creation implies an intelligent cause. Now, can this God sit in some place? Well, then who created the place that God is sitting in? So, if the God created everything, the material for the creation cannot come from outside the God. Therefore, not only that, therefore, there are other reasons to say, to know, but even by simple logic, the creator and the creation has to have same material. Your question could be, how is this possible? There are two examples that are typically given. One, I think Jaishankar ji also spoke about the spider creating the world of nest. And also the dream created by you. In your dream, you are the material, you are the maker, the world is you. Similarly, the God, then there is no God as a person, right? If the material and maker are the same, both inert and intelligence are all the same. Now, why should we worship such a creator? Because of multiple reasons. I already spoke about you are part of the whole. You belong to the whole. You are not an isolated being. Now you tap into that grace of the omniscience because there are a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of unknowns even in your own existence. You don't know what happens tomorrow or next minute. You don't know what you will think after 2 minutes. What is going to be your thought? Do you have any control? You don't. So nothing, there's so much of variability in everything. And like we already saw, you need to tap into some grace for you to come over some of these obstructions. There's no choice again because you're helpless. Even the president of United States cannot make sure that he doesn't get COVID, right? He's the most powerful on the earth today. But a virus can catch him. So that's the state of affairs. My ego might say I don't need to worship, but an intelligent person can see through the reality of our life. And to tap the grace is an intelligent thing to do. And Arjuna did that. The only difference between Pandavas and Kauravas was Krishna. In fact, Kauravas' army was more powerful. They had more arrays of soldiers. The amount of Akshini that they actually had was much. Aparyaptam tadasmakam balam bhima virakshitam. So this Bhagavad Gita, in the first chapter, Duryodhana talks about it. So he thinks his army is more powerful. Bhishma virakshitam. Bhishma is there, Drona is there, Karna is there. Ashwatthama is there. So many warriors, so many Maharathis are there. But why did they lose? Because of Bhagavan. So then you can't ask, hey, will I also get Krishna for that? No. See, what is implied there is not just the name and form of Krishna, but a Bhagavan who takes care of the unseen factors. That is tapping into the grace. So if you are intelligent, you would tap into that grace because you need to be at the right place at the right time, like Jayendra said, right? You need to just make right decisions. To make a right decision, see, the whole life is, like Pujya Swamiji used to say, the entire life is about series of decisions we make. Isn't it true? Every day, so many decisions we make. And your life is all about what decisions you made. And if there is one thing that you have to pray to Bhagavan, is the help for you to make the right decisions. That's why in Gayatri, we ask the Bhagavan to give us the faculty to make the right decisions. Na prachodaya. May my mind be in a position to make the right decisions. There's nothing archaic. It's the most intelligent thing that we have to do is to tap into the grace of Bhagavan. It's not the creation, creator, all that. Forget all that, right? Bhagavan is everywhere. You just need to tap into that grace because your own very existence is nothing but Bhagavan. I mean, we have no clue about what was there 70 years back other than watching some news and TV, right? We were not witness to all that, and we are not going to witness another thousands of years. That's going to come later. So our existence is so short. There's nothing. I don't know how people have the ego. Our knowledge is so small. So tapping into grace is the most intelligent thing to do. And anyway, you don't have a choice. It's up to us whether we want to be intelligent and tap into the grace, or think that we are beyond all this God and all that. One God, many gods. We have seen that Devatas are different. The omnipresence is different. These are two different ways. When I say different ways of looking at it. Where I can go to a general physician or I can go to an eye specialist. Both are doctors. General physician can take care of the general health, but an ophthalmologist or a pediatrician or an obstetrician, whatever, right? Orthodontist, they can take care of very specific problem because they are focused on that. So Devatas are focused on specific things, whereas Sarvadeva Namaskaraha Keshavam Pratikachati. So even if you treat for your eyes, you are still treating the same person. But for now you are focused on eyes. Similarly, it's okay to, so that's another problem. With some of these other religion, there are some of the sampradayas, even within our own religion, our own whatever Sanatana Dharma, where people say, "Ah, you should not worship that god, this god. Don't worship all these devatas. Only worship Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma suchaha." They interpret it, Mamekam means that particular form only. Okay? Read Bhagavad Gita. This Mam, when Bhagavan uses, he is using in 95 to 96%, except for two instances, like Pujasamji will say, he uses it in the sense of Ishvara or Sarvavyapi Bhagavan, not as Krishna, son of Vasudeva. So Vasudeva's son is an avatara, we are not debating all that, but you should not think like ISKCON, correct? That only that form. If you give that Ishvara another name like Subramanya, then that's all. You are not correct. That is another theology only, even within Sanatana Dharma. Therefore, Devata, Bhagavan, all are same. You invoke the Bhagavan with a particular focus, it becomes a Devata. That was the other thing we have seen. Religion should teach us do's and don'ts, not on Samanya Dharma. But Vishesha Dharma we will cover a little bit. It talks a little bit on Dharma. There are certain, because in certain contexts we won't know what is to be done, not to be done. Not Samanya Dharma is fine, whether I should lie or whatever, that is okay. But life is not so straightforward. It's not about whether you should see. Some of the other theologies even talk about you should not lie all that. You should not get angry. Does anger even take your permission? So those kind of statements are not of value, because you can't, it's things not in your control. Don't be angry means what? That I have choice over me getting angry. So those kind of do's and don'ts are not very meaningful. But there are complex situations when you have to decide. So in some of those, like Mahabharata talks about, it creates context, it creates a setup where there is a conflict of dharma. What should I do? What I shouldn't do? And then it solves it so that you learn from it, right? That is, in that context, certain itihasas become a source for us. And Shastras also talk about a few things. It just says, you do this, it is good for you, that's all. Tasmat Shastram Pramanante Karyakarya Vyavastitau Jnatva Shastra Vidanoktam Karma Kartum Iharhasi. In Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says, just understand what Shastra is saying. It is good for you to understand and go by it, because Shastra only tells you what is good. And we have to understand what is Shastra again. We are only, when we say Shastra, we are mostly talking Shruti. Smriti, little bit there is a flexibility. Based on the times when there is a situation, Sishtachara also is a pramana. Go to learned people and ask them to interpret it for you. That's what Shastra itself gives you. So that's not a dogma that we are trying to enforce. But see the value and adopt it. What is success in life? I think Jaishankarji spoke about. We will also cover a little bit. Why and how do we pray? Prayerful attitude. I think Jaishankarji has covered. If not, we will look at it. What is yoga of attitude? Meaningful practices. I think we haven't covered couple of this. I'll add it to the next slide. Next slide, I wanted to say what is left to cover. Hinduism is described a way of, I am going to cover a little bit because I saw some questions on few things where people are being questioned on certain aspects of our culture and Sanatana Dharma, they are not able to answer. Can you touch that? These are little sensitive areas. I'll try and cover what is the vision behind some of these things. And again, some of these systems are not in vogue in these days. So we are not saying we have to bring it back, but we just want to understand what is the spirit of it, by which in which it was all, in those societies, just to understand what was behind all those. I'll cover that. I don't want to keep talking abstract way, but what I'm saying is keep that in perspective when you listen to all this, right? We are not, trying to say we should go back to that age. Okay, that's not what is the intent. We will also talk about some of what is japa, what is meditation, how to do japa, what is the significance of puja, all that. Okay, because those are some questions that I saw we haven't answered. Now let's do some quiz. Okay, because as a break. The question is, what does Veda not cover of the below? Okay, so what does Veda contain and which of the ones that Veda doesn't talk about in a significant way? Okay, not a, okay. So just a ritual for getting rain, ritual for progeny, description about truth of life, forms and story of gods, mantras propitiating various devatas, advice on what to do after study of health. Just give the number. I don't think I have 7 here, but that's okay. Just narration of certain incidents and mantras in praise of Rudra. Okay. Yeah, give your choice. Okay, most of you are correct here. 4 is what typically people think that Vedas talk about gods like, the Pauranika gods, right? So, but actually, this is not much other than the Arthavada. That's why narration of certain incidents, I will just put it there. As an Arthavada, it, as in like to tell something, it brings some incidents like Agni event, like Somas Pratamo Vivide. There is one. This is also very controversial. It became that in Tamil Nadu, this Stalin spoke in one function that it talks in a very bad manner about women and all that. That it doesn't, it's just a simple says Somah Pratamo Vivide Gandharvo Vivida Uttaraha Tritiyo Agnishtepati Turiyaste Manushyajaha. A girl gets married first to Soma, then she gets married Gandharva, then she gets married to Agni's son or whatever, and then she marries Agni and then she marries human. It is all just talking about various stages of a girl's, growth. That's all. But people, so when she is married to Soma means what? As a child, as a very baby, she is in a certain way. And then finally she is married to a man is what it says. Okay. So people, so these are like narrations to just, that's where I'm talking. I mean, we don't want to go into that one, but so that is a narration, that's Arthavada. So it is trying to tell something by narrating. But forms and story of gods usually is part of the Purana. Okay, so it's not there. And many people have said 6 advice on what to do. Okay, it is not elaborately there, but in Taittiriya, it talks about Antevasina Manushasti, Satyam Vada, Dharmam Chara, and all that. So there is this very small portion where it does talk about Swadhyaya Pravachanabhyam na Pramaditavyam. So you should do some of these things. As though a teacher tells the students, there is a narration. Okay, that's why I think some people have thought that 6 is not there, but it is actually there in the Veda. Okay, that's okay. Most of you, I think, have. This one I'm not giving choice. You have to type it. 3 types of karma. I think Deshandarji would have taken this, right? 3 types of karma, like Punya Papa. What are 3 types of karma that generally we talk about in Shastra? Now, Punya Papa I'm talking about. I see somebody answer. That's why I put it in bracket. Not actions, but Punya Papa karma. Okay, I think most of you are there. Okay, so quickly, this is how it is. I saw this in the web, so it's a good way to depict it. Okay, all the collective karma of my entire past is Sanchita. Is shown in some kind of a rose or red color here, and out of which you pick something and get born, right? That is prarabdha. And finally, the agamya is what you pick up in this lifetime. Okay, so that's our model, just to understand it. Okay, so we'll do some more quiz later. I wanted to cover a few things, right? This is a little sensitive but I think we need to understand these. Okay, the reason I wanted to talk because somebody had raised this, right? So while we all claim that, hey, it's a way of life, that's okay, Astikas make that point of view. But around us, we hear, hey, your religion has so many problems, whether it is set of Westerners or even in India. People raise all this, right? There is Varna Vibhas, untouchability, there is Raucham, people talk about Madi and all that. And then you have Itihasas where, did Rama do the right thing by doing Valivata, and then they have Ekalavya story. There's so much restrictions in the religion. There is, you are saying Brahman, all this universality of God, all that, but there is a caste hierarchy. There are strange gods, and Hindus, nobody can become what is. So there are things that we keep hearing, right? There is other religions are doing a lot of charity. Our Sanatana Dharma, there is no organized charity or anything. We don't take care of people. So what is this? I mean, and so these are kind of questions that lot of us are also struggling with, isn't it? Because even our own children, we are not able to answer. While it is all good to say this is the understanding, but how do I answer when I'm so each individual question before we answer, we need to understand some background. Okay. Look at today's society. We are in a competitive society, right? It's about who comes first. All the way from LKG, right? We are brought up that we should get the first rank, especially in our childhood days. It was a big thing. In a 70 or 60 member classroom, I should be the first. Even a second or third is not acceptable. And it goes all the way, right? Even in our corporate culture now, whether you are rated exceeds all or exceeds most or meets most or meets some or outstanding, good, bad, you are always judging, you are being judged. You are self-judging and you are also being judged. You are always seeing yourself whether you are successful or a failure. And coming second is also a failure because you have somebody in front of you. and you are always having a tug of war. Is a competition not good? Yes. The problem with the competitive, if they think competition promotes, to some extent it may, promotes a culture of performance, but at the same time, it also creates a problem because humans are self-judgmental. There's nothing wrong with it, but we are the only species who have self-judgment. A tiger or a lion or a cow or a buffalo is not self-judgmental. A buffalo is not crying because it is black, nor a white cow crying because it is very white. So we have a self-judgment, and a competitive society creates problems and conflicts. There is always somebody better. And the pursuits in a competitive society is also because the goals are driven by my sense of insecurity. I need money, I need more money, I need to have these kind of, you know, facilities, luxuries for me to be even seen to fit my society. Correct? So I'm all the time driven by sense of insecurity, sense of incompleteness. And I'm always in search of what can make me happy. And I'm not easily achieving it because I'm competing. I'm competing for the resources, I'm competing for my space. And in the process, I am always judging me, and there are conflicts. And the choices everywhere is innumerable. When I want to buy a phone, cell phone, I have 100 varieties, and I never know whether I bought the right one. And whatever I buy, my wife is not happy. Nor am I happy with whatever she buys also. And then you have hurt guilt. Because the choices are more, there is always a conflict. When there is competition, there is a conflict. But you don't get out of it because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You have a belief, expectation, behavior, results, belief, expectation, behavior, each reinforcing the other. You think this is the way life has to move on because you have to perform, you have to give your best, you have to give more. You keep pushing, pushing, pushing. And then one day, you know what happens. And your progenies carry forward the same thing. So the whole life runs in a competitive society, competing, trying to grab. And when you try to grab, you cut corners, you cheat, and then you get into guilt and hurt. So this is the society. Nothing wrong or right, but isn't this the reality? The ancient society, the reason I'm covering this is not like I again want to reiterate, it's not to justify anything, but we have to understand the spirit of some of the structures and setup, right? The whole idea of the ancient social structures was to limit a competitive society, reduce choices, but focus on emotional and spiritual growth, and which should culminate in the overall vision. The vision is every person gets liberated, as in gets free from the bondage. We'll cover what is bondage and all that. But the human life is to grow emotionally, to grow to be a contributor from being a consumer. I start as a consumer. I consume in life, right? As I am born, I am consuming. I consume my mother's time. I consume my father's time. Everybody is there to actually help me grow, isn't it? I need help to just survive, not even to grow. Just to survive, I need support. So I consume. I am consuming the people's life around me, right? They are all there just taking care of me to grow, at least till 5 years, 6 years. And then I consume from my teachers, from my parents. I can till at least 20 years or 15 to 17 years, I will be a consumer, right? Then I can start to be a contributor to the society. I can, but how many of us grow into contributors? We are all consumers because we are emotionally, security wise, we are still competing. As I compete, I am a consumer. So how can I grow into being a contributor? How can I emotionally grow? How can I spiritually grow? Right? That is the objective. And eventually you grow so much that you actually become free of all these things. That is, so if that is the objective, if that is the vision, so how can a society and an individual be provided a way in which one can go through this? That is the overall vision on which our way of life was based. So the idea is create a non-competitive environment, right? Create an environment where you are not competing as in, should I become an archer or a pot maker or somebody who does havan, or do I? There is no choice there. You are not competing for right or wrong, but that is the again, in today's world, people will say, why should I restrict somebody when the person has faculty, the person can become a pot maker, right? That's okay. I'm not against all that. I'm just trying to tell you what was the thought behind the other system. That's all. It's up to you to make your judgment whether it is right or wrong, good or bad. There was a system, right? What was the thinking behind it? That's all I'm trying to say. Creating a non-competitive environment, the choices are made very minimal. Today, if I want a coffee in my flight Lufthansa, Fujisamaji's example, this is not my example, okay? I have to, this is all, some of these things we have to give the credit, right? It's a trademark Fujisamaji example. The coffee means what? With milk, without milk, with sugar, without sugar, with creamer, with no creamer, right? Caffeinated, decaffeinated, and then choco added, not added, hot, cold. There are some 20 choices, and you never know whether you have made the right choice. Whereas in our Madras Tikri coffee, you will get one coffee, right? All composition is all preset. So you don't even think coffee means that's coffee. All the maximum you will say it was little tasty today or not. Which one is better? Some people may say more choices is better. But some of us might say that no, lesser choice better because I get my coffee, right? And then I move on. I don't have to keep worrying about whether I had the right combination or not. So choice is kept minimal, right? So at the age of 7 or 8, a lot of decisions are already there. Like, see, certain things you take it for granted. You don't question. This is my father. Do you question? Do you ever think, oh, maybe this other person could have been? You don't think like that, right? Not mostly. So it's given. Father is given, mother is given, sisters are given, grandfather is given, right? So they said keep the choice minimum. So the life partner is also given, and also the job you are going to be doing is also, because this is where most of our choice problem comes. What career should I have? Who should I marry? Right? Most of life's two major things are these two. There also they kept the choice too little. Okay, so you are kept in the context in those days is reduce the competition, reduce the choice, make a person work towards something else, right? Not get hung up in this thing. Anyway, whatever choice you make, we all know, correct? Not that we always make perfect choices. Create an environment for emotional growth. So the overall thing is to grow, because you always aspire not for these things. Your aspiration is about how do you actually emotionally grow, how do you become a contributor, how do you spiritually grow. And that's how the structures are also kept. Okay, and the life stages also, I'll talk about it, are also aligned to this. Culture is aligned, forms are aligned, right? And finally, if you want to get liberated, there is a knowledge, body of knowledge, which focuses on how you can free yourself from all this emotional race. And there is a lifestyle also given so that you can pursue it. And that pursuit is supported by the society, right? That's how the structure was. Okay. Let me ask one question here, because anyway, this quiz is typically interesting. So for people, and also it gives you a break, right? Most of you will know this, but what are the four ashramas? Typically, we say Varnashrama Dharma, right? What are the four ashramas? Ashrama, not Varna. Somebody is answering Varna. Yeah, it's very interesting. We take the answers. I thought 90% will be clear on this, but people are confusing Varna with Ashrama. Yeah, maybe 90% I was, at least 80% are correct. Okay, so yeah, those are the ashramas, right? Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasa. Okay, those are the ashramas. Okay, yeah, I will have one more quiz, because why I placed it here is because as part of the ashrama, I'm going to talk about some of these things. That's why I just moved it ahead. Why don't you answer this also? So amongst these, which is not a Samanya Dharma? Okay, I think Jaishankar ji spoke about Samanya and Vishesha Dharma. That's why I'm asking this question. So just to clarify on Samanya Dharma is basic rights and wrongs, right? Vishesha Dharma is based on your Varna and Ashrama, what is right and wrong. To be done, not right and wrong, to be done by that person, that particular Ashrama or particular Varna alone can do it. Like that, there are few things. And then there is a Samanya Dharma, which is common for everyone, right? So, with that context, can you answer this? What is not Samanya Dharma? Somebody has listed a big list. Okay. What is not is the question, not what is Samanya Dharma. I'm asking what is not Samanya Dharma, what is actually out of this, or the other way to ask that question is out of this, which is the Vishesha Dharma. Correct. I think it's good. I think many of you are correct. So, Satyam, being truthful, is common for it. So, that's how you have to understand this, right? Samanya Dharma means what everybody has to do, right? The right thing to do for everyone. So, being truthful, you don't need to be this person or that person, right? Ahimsa, Asteyam, not stealing. Shaucham, general purity, right? Then Indriya Nigraha, control of senses. Okay, some people say take it as a Vishesh, but generally this is also considered as Samanya Dharma. You don't let it go totally out of control, right? Then Shama, forgiveness, arjavam. So you can't say Indriya Nigraha is applicable only for when we say again, like see again this Indriya Nigraha in our general usage, people think it is talking about control on making love and all that, right? That is Indriya Nigraha is everything, right? Don't let your taste buds go and eat food everywhere, right? All the time. Similarly, don't keep on watching movies, right? Certain level of controls on all your senses, what it is, right? Kshama and Arjavam, straightforwardness, Akrodha, all these are Samanya Dharma. Everybody, it is good for everyone to have these kind of controls. Paikshyam is a Vishesha Dharma, right? You don't have to live on frugal alms, right? But for certain people, it is prescribed because we will cover that. But for certain, like a sannyasi, right, or a brahmachari, these are prescribed because we don't want, I mean, not we, as in the Shastra doesn't want them to be pulled away by senses, right? Like food. Because they choose to focus on certain things in order for you to focus on, say, if you are focused on a knowledge, if you are focused on knowledge, it is suggesting that you don't let yourself be consumed by other things. Okay, that's why those are spoken about. Well, let's see how much time. 12 minutes. I'll talk 5 more minutes. Maybe tomorrow we will continue. So to leave for some questions. Okay, so the non-competitive society, right? If you see, most of today's the Western society is driven by rights. My right, right? So the right of way. When I drive the car, I have my right of way. As a citizen, I have my right. As a son, this is my right, isn't it? So it's our right-driven society, right? Western society is driven by rights. But if you think about our thing, we are a duty-driven society, right? Your itihasas talk about duty towards my parent. That's why Kennedy also spoke, right? Don't think what the country has done for you, to think what you have done for. It was a big statement, right? In those for West, but for us, it would have been strange that somebody had to speak like that, isn't it? Because our society is always duty. Pitrivakya Paripalanam is a duty. Then you say Pativrityam, duty towards my husband, right? That's all it is. My duty towards my wife, my duty towards my father, my duty towards my son. So it's driven by duty, right? So my duty naturally becomes the right for the other person, right? I have my duty towards my father, so that becomes the right of my father. But my father doesn't demand that right. But I am enforced a duty by dharma that naturally becomes the other person's right. So there is a big difference in the thinking, and you naturally are tied by the dharma. What is dharma and adharma also binds you because it is associated with a certain punya papa and dharmika layer, isn't it? Similarly, what is given versus what is chosen, right? Again, think about it, right? The moment I am saying this is given, I don't look for choices there, because your goal of life is different and you are aligned towards that. In fact, I think all these are taken from this Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavan says, Bahushaka Hyanantascha Buddhayaha Avyavasayinam Vyavasayatmika Buddhihi Ekeha Kurunantara. So, if you have all these distractions, it's like the fruits of a tree. It can, I mean, there are so many different type of trees and different type of fruits, and you can keep going after all these things. and you will get scattered all over. But for somebody who has clearly identified what the goal is, the person is focused on it, right? And that's how the whole society was aligned towards this thing, right? This goal, whatever is the overall vision we spoke about. We will quickly cover a couple of ashramas, right? Brahmacharya, again, this has ashrama has nothing to do with, I mean, it's there, was there for every varna, right? There used to be these 4 phases of life. That is what is ashrama. Okay. There was 4 phases of life. If you see that, the whole journey is towards that growth, right? So if you see from Brahmacharya, you grow into being a grihastha, and then you grow into a vanaprastha, and then grow into a sannyasi, right? And why we say each of it is a growth is because there is a increase in responsibility, and there is also increasing you being a contributor. That is a growth. Okay, from being a consumer, you are growing into a contributor, right? And through the stages of life, you are taken through that. So even a brahmachari is given certain vows, right? What are they? In our Upanayana and all, we have this. Okay, brahmachari, you are a brahmachari asi, then he says badam. Yes, sir, I am. Then may you do this, may you do this, may you do this. And then he keeps saying badam, badam. May you have a Bhiksha Jivanam. Means what? Today we have to, Puja Swamiji used to say, we have to interpret is eat what is available. Don't have choice. That's what. So today we can see that's where the spirit has to be taken, is what he used to say. What is to understand the spirit of what was done and adopt the spirit. Forms can change. That day there was this form, Varna Dharma, whatever, right? It's okay. It could have been gone. That system has changed today. But what was the spirit, right? What was the intent of doing it? So you adapt the spirit and you change the form, right? So one of the examples is this, right? So when you say Bhiksha Jivanam means what? The idea is, just don't go after your tongue, right? That's what is the spirit. So you just, Bhiksha means whatever you get, you eat. That's what is Bhiksha, right? So may you eat what is available, right? So a brahmachari focuses on studies, not on food. So like that, there are certain vows, right? Again, what is needed for that stage of life, right? Your focus is on studies, because what you study is, see, not like today, right? Today I studied something in till class 12, or even in my engineering. I did mechanical engineering. I'm a software guy, right? We don't even use most of what I studied in geography and all that. Very minimally we use, right? So 12 years we study, and like history, I don't even know why we studied some of those. Some of it is not even true, right? Rather, if we had studied some of these things, it would have been more useful. But in a system, your brahmacharya is used to get something which is going to help you through your life, right? So there was a certain rigor in what was being done. Okay. I think we are running out of time. 5 minutes more. Okay. So I think we will, yeah, order means yes, accepted, right? That is what it is. I'll quickly cover in another 2 minutes on the 3 ashram 4, because we started this. I will continue tomorrow. So it's the same thing, right? So a grihastha dharma also, see, that's why I wanted to touch upon this. Grihastha dharma also is spiritual only. Okay, a marriage, we'll cover that. So what is a marriage about? Marriage is also for growth. Okay, so some of these things will. So there's some questions were there, place of women in our shastra and all that. Okay, and what is sannyasa is another thing we have to talk about. See, again, lot of these are misunderstood. Today's people don't even know what is even sannyasa, right? That's why it is all Both sides misuse it. Even sannyasis themselves, many of them, the today's so-called spiritual gurus, it is becoming like an organized institution of, ashrams and all that. Right? Sannyasa is a very different concept. Similarly, what is a grihastha responsibility? We have to understand in those days society, because grihastha is central to the society. Because a brahmachari is dependent on a grihastha, a sannyasi is dependent on a grihastha, even a vanaprastha, right, often could be dependent. So the central concept is the grihastha, and like I said, the duty versus right becomes very, very important. Unless the duty mindedness is there in a grihastha, this kind of a society cannot be sustained. But also think of it the other way. A grihastha was once a brahmachari, and the grihastha also is going to be probably a sannyasi at some point in time, right? And who sustains them again is some other grihastha, right? So this grihastha dharmam becomes central to this society, right? So we need to, that is where we have to understand what was the spirit. When you are asked these kind of questions, you should know what was the theme. See, they may or may not accept it. You also may not find it appropriate today, but it is also only fair that we understand what was the spirit behind the way the society was structured and all these duties were structured in those days, right? At least so that you first understand it right before we even dismiss it. Like we are saying there is no God. Hey, first understand what is God. You have your own notion that this is what God is, and then say I don't agree that there is this God. First of all, yeah, you are wrong in your understanding of God, right? So if I say energy can't be matter, because E is not MC squared. See, this wall is not energy. Matter can't be energy. So I dismiss. Means what? Because I don't understand, right? That's why I'm dismissing. Who am I to dismiss? First of all, I don't even know what it is. Similarly, when somebody says I'm an atheist, I don't accept there is God, means he's dismissing a God that he thinks God is. That's all what it is. So understand what is Bhagavan first of all, right? So similarly, here also when we say Varnashrama Dharma and all that, people should understand what it was meant to. Right? Then, then you talk about it, right? Now you have your own notion that it is all some hierarchical setup and somebody wanted to rule over others and all kinds of things, right? That is your notion, right? If that notion is true, yeah, I mean, fine. But is that right? The question. Right? So that's why even because you are asked these questions, so I'm just spending some time on it. Okay, I know it is all very sensitive thing, but you just want to understand what it is. So I stop here. We are nearly on the time. We can take a couple of questions if you have. There are no questions? Okay, if there are no questions, we can conclude. Okay. What are the duties of brahmachari as a daughter? Okay, so the women, I will cover the um, the gender related things in probably tomorrow. Okay, there is a lot, right? Because if you look at the ancient days, one thing that again Puji Swamiji used to say, even our vigrahas in temples, you can see they have the Upavita and all that, even for goddesses. Even today, this Upanayana is notionally done at the time of wedding for the girl getting married, and that Upavidhi is actually given to the husband. Okay, that means there was a reason why socially it was changed, but in our system, the knowledge pursuit was common for both. And we also read about Rishikas and all that. I think Rishikarji covered. There were even women rishis, and there were a lot of people who gave works. Women, even in Tamil, we read about so many people, no, Karikalammayar and Avvayar. So, as a society, from both religious and literature and all perspective, there was no distinction in that sense. But socially, they made some changes, right? We will talk about it. Even sannyasa technically was there for women also. Okay, like Vanaprastha is anyway there. Sannyasa, you can see in some form was there. But as a brahmachari, as a daughter also, in today's setup also, anyway, the system has also changed today to, from social aspect, there is no distinction between the two. But in terms of knowledge pursuits and what a girl can do, what a boy, there is a differentiation slightly which is there. We'll talk about it tomorrow because it's a slightly involved topic. Why did religions like Buddhism branch out of Hinduism? Okay. See, you have to look at two aspects, right? One, the social structure to provide for this emotional and spiritual growth, correct? That is one thing we spoke about. But once you come out of this system, right, you become a sannyasi or whatever, right? Or you can take sannyasa or you just go after knowledge. But without taking sannyasa also was done. Now, in pursuit of knowledge, there is, you cannot limit a person to say this is how you should pursue, because somebody is after knowledge, right? And the person goes through his or her own pursuit of knowledge. While Shastra talks about Shruti Matas Tarkona Sandhiyatam and all that, go along with Shruti. But when a person goes in pursuit of knowledge in those days, it is natural that even within Shruti Mata, even within the Vaidika thing, there has become multiple sampradayas came out. Right? And there were also effects of people coming out of Vaidika structure, right? So Buddhism, I think the question has two aspects to it, because I think somebody is asking a question here: why did Buddhism branch out of Hinduism? One is the enquiry itself. When you talk about an enquiry, Buddha landed up with a view that there is no Brahman or anything, there is only Shunyam. There is no underlying truth beyond, everything is Maya. Okay. Because he came to that conclusion, he also dismissed everything that Veda said. Okay. So he cannot just dismiss Brahman is Satyam alone. So he had to dismiss everything. So he dismissed Varna Dharma, Ashrama Dharma, everything. Okay. So Buddhism had an impact both on social structures as well as the conclusions that people derived from Shruti. Also, he didn't even accept Shruti. That's a different thing. But that was the reason why Buddhism branched out, because it differed in the final vision itself. So our vision is everything is one, and a social structure is needed for you to grow from where you are to be able to reach that goal. Okay, that is the way the Veda looks at it, because we talk about three gunas, and which we also see, right, in every person there is a combination of three guna. There is nothing good or bad; it's a reality, right? There is a satvika, tamasa, rajasa guna, whatever. There is a combination, and this leads to a person to be what that person is. This is a model. This is a one model, right? There's nothing right or wrong. There is a model saying that everybody is a combination of these three gunas. Now a person has to grow, right? When a person has to grow, you have to first see where that person is and then make that person have a journey to grow. That is how our system looked at the growth. Whereas Buddhists looked at it as though like everything is Maya, so there is no point in having these kind of structures. So just break it, right? That's how they looked at it. That's why Buddhism has a different view both from Siddhanta perspective as well as from the structure perspective. Also, they kind of that's how they grew out of Hinduism. Case of massive destruction like earthquake, tsunami, impacting many lives. How does this connect with karma pala? Okay. See, there is a samashti karma, and we also talk about veshti karma, right? See, if you look at how is karma reflected, typically it is in the jataka and all that, right? It's a model. Karma also is a model only. You are giving a structure to understand. See, there is you don't figure out anything, right? Today, I don't even know why I am born this way, why I am short, why I am fat, why I am born to this family, why am I born on this date, why is this thing happening to me? Why? We don't know, right? So to give some understanding to it, there is a system. So that is, it's a model, right? So this Navagraha model and Jatakam and all that astrological model is used to understand what is going on, right, for an individual. So that's where horoscope and all that is there. But if you see, there will be also horoscopes to not just an individual, but samashti, right? In some case you have, the country itself, they are having Jataka and all that, right? And there is some predictions and stuff like that. So there is also, we have to assume that there is a samashti, right? So there is a veshti and samashti. So an individual and a collective. So a collective also needs to, so your tsunami and all that, you have to only take it that way. There is no, whether it is right, wrong, can there be a samashti? Yeah, samashti individual is always connected to the whole. So only certain group of people got affected, even in tsunami. So that why I am in that group, because again my Vyashti karma, right? And why there is a group, maybe together they have a certain collective prarabdha. Otherwise, why should I be born in India? I have all the people who are born in India have some similarity, right? We all in the same temperature, we all live in the same ecosystem, same environment. We all have same kind of problems. Why should I be born here? Because there is a Veshti and Samashti there also. There is a collective. Okay, we'll stop. We'll talk tomorrow. If you have any questions, meanwhile, you can just send it to Sri Vidyaji. I can try and address them tomorrow, right? I don't want to. Anyway, we are coming towards the end of this thing. So, better that we drive it with some questions. And I will anyway complete whatever we have. And Japa and all I have to talk about. Tomorrow I will cover.